can sleep easily tonight, you know. This is the whole misunderstanding about the whole thing.
I think the people I was most keen on helping were people I regarded as being very, very vulnerable. Very, very young people who came over from Dublin, Cork or Limerick or Galway, wherever, maybe to get away from the drug scene back there or to get away from dysfunctional family setups. And came over here but really didn't have any contacts, maybe one or two friends, and that was about it, and maybe still hadn't kicked the drug habit or whatever. They were falling between stools here because they didn't really know anybody. They'd never lived in a large city like London. They didn't really have any accommodation. There was no proper planning for them to be here or anything like that. And probably to feed the drug habit, some of them ended up breaking into shops, and building societies and banks and things, and ended up in prison. And I would visit them in some of the London prisons like Wormwood Scrubs, Pentonville and Brixton. They would be there and they wouldn't even remember who their solicitor was, the duty solicitor given to them whenever they were brought into prison. And they then didn't want to know want their families back in Ireland to know that they were even here, and they certainly didn't want them to know they were in prison. So that became a real problem, and especially at Christmas time. So there were a number of guys that stuck out like that were really very, very vulnerable guys, and the ICPO was there to help them, and we did help them as much as we possibly could.
Just to give one case of a man who I've been in contact with for 30 years, he's hardly able to write. But about 2 weeks ago I had a letter from him, about 3 lines, which said, "My sister Maria died last year, 2010. I was only told about her this year in October. Now I have nobody," and the one sentence that stands out is, "I am very sad." Now, forgotten people like him, just to get a letter from me that he can respond to from time to time, it means the world to him.
In terms of prisoners overseas, what I used to find really hard was to see, especially younger people who had no family support. And you know, your ICPO then is almost in loco parentis, you know, trying to be there for people. And again, you're going back to see, how did this happen? Why is that young person so isolated? It's a real privilege for us as an organisation to be able to journey with people, not just in a caring capacity, but also to be able to make really positive interventions, to plan, to work with other organisations, you know, to make good, safe pathways for people. So I think that's a very, very positive thing. And I know that some of the people we've worked with, thank God, have gone on to be able to rebuild their lives and to have good and positive lives.
There was one young lad in prison in South America, and the mother had a very poor self-image, and she was very poorly skilled, and she would have been terrified to travel out to see him. Now, he was only 18 as well, and it was very costly. When the mother tried to phone the prison, she ran into debt with her phone. So they were entitled to get support with travel once a year if the prisoner was abroad. And I decided to make contact in this particular situation with the social welfare officer to say that you would be spending the fare for that mother to get out to visit the son. That's not going to happen because she doesn't have the confidence to travel. But I said, I'm asking you to pay her phone bill for phone calls to her son. And after some negotiation, they said it had never been done before, they decided that they would pay for a half an hour once a week for a phone call, or 2 quarter of an hour each week. So they did that for the rest of the time he was in prison. And it was trying to make sure that there was some way of the family maintaining the contact, because these youngsters were going to come back out to their families again. And if the relationship was totally severed, there were going to be more difficulties.
There's no doubt in my mind at all that the ICPO has been an absolute lifeline for many prisoners and for their families over the years. And how do we know that? Well, we get it from the feedback from the prisoners themselves, we get it from the feedback from their families. It's wonderful just to actually meet with some of the guys in the prison and find out how they're getting on, how they're coping or not coping, and letting them know that you're there to help in any way you can and liaise with their families. And then maybe in the afternoon or the evening, bring their families back in Ireland if they can't do it themselves, and let them know how their son or daughter's getting on here. And just to hear the voices at the other end of the phone, the voice of almost relief to know that, for the families and the parents in particular, to know that there's an organisation over there that's really looking after their son or daughter in prison here and takes the trouble to go and visit them and help them in any practical way we can. It's of immense value to them. There's no question about that. That's really been the great success story of the ICPO over the years.
My New Year's Day this year was a lad who should have got out on New Year's Eve from Dartmoor. Some others had asked him to receive something in. If it got through, it was theirs. If it got caught, it was his. So he refused, trashed his cell, because he could see that to get down to the Seg was the only option for him. I arrived with a friend in the dark to meet him on New Year's Eve and to be met by a detective constable who was gate arresting him. There was no point whatsoever in contacting him or going to the court the next day. There was going to be a court on New Year's Day because the magistrate would definitely be sending him straight back to Dartmoor. So eventually I got through to where he was being held and said, look, give him this phone number in case he wants it. New Year's Day I was going out to church actually when I had a phone call. Could I come and meet him in Plymouth because the magistrate had freed him. I had all his travel documents because London had got them for him but I hadn't got time to get them to him, so they'd sent them to me. So we managed to get up to Plymouth, meet him and get him on the train 24 hours late. The difference that made to his mother in Galway was just amazing that he actually got home. And that's the sort of thing that we can do.
I think a key thing for ICPO has always been the mixing of pastoral concerns with the rights of prisoners. And I think it's absolutely crucial at the moment that the rights of prisoners are not forgotten about. You know, as human beings, they have human rights and those need to be guarded and they need to be articulated very, very clearly. I think it's crucial at the moment that ICPO articulates those rights. Secondly, one of the things that I regret that ICPO hasn't done would be to also focus on the issues being faced by prisoners from other communities and other contexts, from other countries who are actually living in Ireland, you know, and I think that might be one development which could be considered within this overall frame of work with migrants and work with immigrants. But I think linking the pastoral concern with rights work for me is absolutely crucial into the future. I don't think ICPO would be as successful as it has been by only focusing on rights or only focusing on pastoral care, but I think it's been the fusion of the two. But I think now the using again this sort of the moral status and using again some moral authority to actually speak out for the rights of those who are most marginalised is absolutely crucial.
I think ICPO has performed a very important bridging role between the church and the state, between individuals and the state, between prisoners and families sometimes, between the institutions of the state and the services of the state and the individuals.
We are in very challenging times. There is no doubt but that human rights are being challenged in a number of parts of the world, including in Europe. And in the sort of context we're in, where economic and social justice can't be guaranteed, it seems to me that the rights of prisoners are certainly very difficult to guarantee. And I think the sort of courage that was required then is going to be required again now, and possibly around different issues. It's hard to say what are the sort of things that prisoners will be, Irish people will be in prison for overseas.